Наша розвідка фіксує не лише передачу зброї з Північної Кореї до Росії, але й передачу людей. Це робітники для російських заводів замість убитих на війні громадян Росії і особовий склад для російської армії. І це уже факт. Фактично, це участь вже другої держави у війні проти України на стороні Росії. Кожен бачить допомогу іранського режиму для Путіна, так само, як і співпрацю Китаю з Росією. Попри заяви, Пекін утримується від справді серйозних дієвих кроків для того, щоб зупинити Путіна, зупинити агресію і порушення Росією статуту ООН. І ми маємо чесно говорити, українці та всі наші партнери, якщо ми не посилимось суттєво зараз, Путін встигне суттєво посилитись в наступному році, посилитись так, щоб назавжди відкинути дипломатію. Росія повинна програти у війні проти України. І це не заморозка, і це не торгівля територіями чи суверенітетом України. Ми повинні...
Ukraine says thousands of North Korean troops are currently training in Russia for deployment to border areas. South Korea, for its part, is responding with much concern to these latest events.
That right there is an inside look at a U.S. F-16 fighter jet last week near Alaska, and you can see a Russian jet swooping in dangerously close there on the side. The U.S. regularly holds aerial intercepts of Russian aircraft in international airspace near Alaska, and that's what that F-16 was trying to do, intercept that Russian flight. Officials say they're usually carried out in a safe manner. One Air Force general says the Russian pilot's maneuver was, quote, unsafe, unprofessional, and endangered all.
Yeah.
Someone could have been killed up there.
Vladimir Putin's red lines have been crossed before. The West has supplied missiles, tanks and fighter jets to Ukraine, all without retaliation. But Moscow insists this time it's different.
Have you ever heard a very old Russian proverb that Russians are long to move, but then they move fast? That's the case.
If, for example, Ukraine actually uses British Storm Shadow missiles to strike inside Russia, what, Russia's going to nuke London?
Everything that is written in our nuclear doctrine, you should take very serious.
Our people in Ukraine are doing everything they can to defend our state and independence. And I'm proud of our soldiers who are holding the front under incredibly difficult, tough conditions. They need more strength because Putin is preparing his own reinforcements to continue the war, not end it. Of course, Putin wants to match your country's ammunition production by next year. And he's getting help from North Korea with shells, equipment, now even people. And plus Iran. Unfortunately, we are receiving signal that China is still actively helping Russia drag out this war. And we have clear intelligence data.
And now, new claims by the president that North Korean officers have already been deployed to Ukraine's occupied territories, and that up to 10,000 specialists from North Korea are being prepared to help Russia in its war. Analysts see early signs of that in the inking in June of a mutual defense pact between Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Analysts say the secret meeting between the two leaders may have facilitated the transfer of weapons. Speculation became rife after the New York Times touted September as, quote, the bloodiest for Russian troops since 2022, with around 115,000 dead and nearly 1 million injured.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un gets a case of road rage as he tries to disconnect the North
from the south.
On Tuesday, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ordered the destruction of roads that link his country with the south, just days after claiming the South Korean military flew drones over the capital, Pyongyang. South Korea responded with artillery fire into the DMZ while also beefing up its forces at the border.
It is a clear violation of inter-Korean agreements and very abnormal behavior. We cannot help but deplore North Korea's regressive behavior.
But most observers say it's unlikely more military action will follow, calling Tuesday's explosions more of a symbolic display of anger by Kim Jong-un designed to limit South Korea's cultural influence on the north.
The episode signals escalating tensions on the peninsula. Pyongyang accuses Seoul of routinely violating its airspace. On Sunday, the powerful sister of leader Kim Jong-un warned there would be consequences.
The scattering of leaflets over the capital city will be regarded as a grave, politically motivated provocation and an infringement upon our sovereignty. But the fact that drones carried the leaflets is at the core of the seriousness of this incident.
The destruction of the roads also follows a declaration by Kim that South Korea is the North's principal enemy and a peaceful reunification is no longer his goal. But the U.S. says it's still looking for a diplomatic solution that will bring down tensions and end the military threat.
Our focus has remained intensely on this region. And again, it's because it's so critical to our own future.
North Korea says it plans to permanently block the border and plans to build frontline positions that could be used to attack the south.
North Korea says nearly 1.5 million young people have applied to join its army. State media published photos of what it said were young recruits enlisting. Pyongyang says the rush to join the army follows what it calls a provocative drone incursion by South Korea. North Korea has made similar claims about army recruitment in the past during previous phases of heightened tensions in the region.
China says it has completed military drills around Taiwan, but it will warn that more could follow. Beijing sees democratically ruled Taiwan as part of its territory and says that any push towards independence would prompt action. Can you give me a better idea of this international involvement? I mean, we are reading today that, Chinese and Russian military men are meeting to discuss greater cooperation on that front.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that you've seen since the second invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 is a gradual but steady convergence between Russia and China over what they consider their main strategic challenges. And that key strategic challenge at the moment is their own perceptions of US and US-led power and the place of the United States and her allies within the sort of wider global geostrategic picture. So there's a chiming of interest. And on top of that, you're also seeing sort of North Korea and Iran enter that equation as well. You've got four seemingly quite diverse nations, if you like, quite diverse political systems to an extent, but which have this sort of common concern about US power. And this is how these concerns manifest themselves, is in exercises like the kind we've seen recently.
Ukrainian officials suspect several thousand North Korean soldiers are being trained in the Russian city of Ulan-Ude, that's close to the Mongolian border. It's alleged that the troops could be deployed to the Kursk province, where Ukrainian forces launched an incursion back in August. Kyiv claims Moscow could use these troops in its border regions, which in turn frees up Russian troops to fight on the front line in such eastern regions as Kursk and other occupied territories.
Amid earlier reports that some 3,000 North Korean soldiers have been deployed to Russia, Ukraine's military intelligence told the Kyiv Post on Wednesday that 10,000 North Korean infantry soldiers are undergoing training in Russia's Far East. It added that the troops are being prepared for deployment to border areas near Ukraine and for the rotation of Russian troops. Kyiv's military intelligence says Russia is struggling with a significant manpower shortage on the front lines, prompting North Korea, a key ally of Russia, to step in to provide large-scale support.
If the reports are true, it means the North is not only trading arms with Russia, but also directly participating in the war. Our government considers this a very serious issue.
So what could this mean for neighboring South Korea? Seoul has so far maintained its policy of providing non-lethal assistance to Ukraine. But as Pyongyang fosters stronger ties militarily with Moscow, experts say this could push the South Korean government to rethink the form of its support for Ukraine.
Also within the context, which also cannot be ignored, with Vladimir Putin going towards other suppliers, whether it be Iran for missiles and drones, whether it be to North Korea for munitions, who are keeping the Kremlin's, defense coffers well stocked, their warehouses well stocked.
NATO is fighting for its airspace, officially from a simulated enemy, in Exercise Ramstein Flag in Greece. The first time the alliance has brought all its capabilities into play in an air defense exercise, making use of real-life lessons learned from the war Russia is waging on Ukraine.
Some fighter jets waiting for us in the air, so ground-to-air threat, air-to-air threat, and then some boats trying to engage us as well.
We fly and fight with real scenarios, more or less realistic scenarios, and that's really good.
Some of the scenarios are real. NATO conducted more than 300 intercepts of Russian planes approaching Allied airspace last year. Lately, there's an increasing number of incursions by Russian drones or missiles, which may or may not have been intentional.
It is a worrying development, unacceptable.
NATO's eastern flank countries are already reinforcing their land borders with Russia and Belarus, and now they're planning to mount a wall of drones to help secure their airspace. A Russian drone armed with explosives crashed in Latvia last month, just one of several recent incidents along the front line, which have led some countries to warn they may exercise their right to shoot down incoming drones or missiles which threaten their citizens. For this German colonel, the Ramstein flag exercises reminded him of the huge Cold War drills that were shelved during more peaceful years.
Unfortunately, things have changed, and we need these exercises like this to ensure that we are trained, to ensure that we can provide deterrence and lastly defense of NATO territory.
He says he hopes to see a return to peace in NATO's neighborhood, but that's not on anyone's horizon right now.
And you see this kind of real struggle to keep the world from spinning out of control, because should Putin order the use of tactical nuclear weapons, the world changes. In the Biden administration, they obviously don't want to have it happen on their watch, but they realize if it does happen, they define an era. And for 80 years, no nuclear weapons have been used. And here's Putin, who is not only sadistic, but totally in charge, threatens this. And so they examine, quite rightly, the conditions. Now, wait a minute, why would he use tactical nuclear weapons? And they get into, there are many explicit scenes about the worry in Russia. They have a doctrine that they can use tactical nuclear weapons if they face or experience what they call catastrophic battlefield loss. In other words, there are scenes in Ukraine where the Russians are really threatened with catastrophic battlefield loss, and under their doctrine, use tactical nuclear weapons. And this is what Biden's trying to talk them out of.
Also, when you look at the war in Ukraine, Russia, a bigger country invading Ukraine, some people are saying there could be similarities in how China now looks at Taiwan with that conflict.
You make a very good point, Eva. I mean, the whole question of Ukraine and how that relates to China and Taiwan is very interesting, because on one hand, Russia sees Ukraine almost as this sort of renegade province that it wants to reincorporate into a kind of reconstructed Soviet Union. And here we have a similar sort of situation regarding China and Taiwan. But I think one of the things that's important to realize with the Taiwan situation is that the Chinese military have also seen how difficult Ukraine has been for Russia. Now, on paper, given the Russian military strength, Ukraine should have been a relatively easy area to invade and occupy and then retain. What we're seeing is that that's not been the case at all for Russia, and I'm sure that the Chinese military equally have similar concerns, not least of which any invasion would need to go across the sea and through the air, which complicates matters hugely. So on one hand, you've got this situation where perhaps the leadership in Beijing are thinking, well, Russia has been strategically assertive, it's challenged Western power. But equally, on the other hand, they've seen how difficult that war continues to be for Russia. And that's something, obviously, that the Chinese military need to factor into their thinking regarding any future military operation to invade and occupy Taiwan. So I think, to be fair, all sides are cognizant of that. And I think, to be fair, are trying to avoid it. But it does illustrate how serious these tensions are and how serious things could get if, heavens forbid, something goes wrong.